Okay. Hi. We're gonna begin the season 2 Silva Decodes. Wipe it up, everyone. Wipe it up, chat. Nice, nice. So for those of you who are new or you're just joining in and you don't know what's happening, Silva Decodes is a segment on my stream where I take things a bit more serious and I try to help um, any viewer, pleb or not, with questions. And I thought, what would be fun to actually help people um, and not be boring at all. So I came up with the Silva Decodes segment where you guys ask the question, but along with the question, you post art related to it. So if you have a favorite artist where you like something specific, like, oh, how did he do this effect? Chances are I probably know how, and if I don't, we'll figure it out. That's the whole thing. We're decoding. So sometimes I know the answer straight up because either A, I know the artists personally, or I've seen their process. If none of those, if it's not any of those two things, then I will still figure out how to replicate um, a look. If it's not a look question and it's related to something else like composition, something a bit more abstract, um, I will do exactly the same thing, right? So all you gotta do is type in the chat with the art question, also a link to it, and Calyx will take the question and it's first come first serve. So you post the question. If you posted it before everyone else, then you're gonna be put in line, pretty much. So I would advise everyone, if you are wanting to ask something, don't wait for me to actually um, answer a question and then you're like, oh, he's done answering, now let me ask the question. Don't do that. Post right away. Don't wait for anyone or for anything, because that makes just the flow of the stream easier and you get your question answered faster, right? So with that said, we already had some questions we didn't answer last session, and we're gonna use this as a warm-up. You guys don't wait, just keep on asking, and I answer 100% to everyone, whether it's going to be like right away or in an hour or two, because it depends on how many questions we get. That I don't know, but what I do know is I answer every single person. So you can always check the VOD, because we are keeping the answered questions. We split them and put them on their own video. So you can go to the videos tab on Twitch or in my page, and there's the Silva Decodes season 1 and Silva Decodes season 2. So we're in season 2 now. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this segment. Seems like it was popular, and then I took a break. Let's see if we can still make it popular. No music as well, because I don't want the VOD to be muted, so you're gonna have to deal with my shitty mic. That's the price to pay. Your eardrums. It's all I ask. So I already have one question here. As you can see, it was asked a long time ago. You look at the date. It was a while ago. So we haven't done a session of this for a while. And it's Kuya. Kuya! Also, Silva Decodes is all. Silva Decodes can be also translated to Silva does riot art, because a lot of the questions are riot related. So, first question of the day. Let's see. Kuya is asking, I would like to know what defines League splash art. a while ago. Ken Kill, Keenan Lafferty said that the general formula was to keep the background bright, the character dark. Okay. In your metal video, you mentioned that the gradients were important. I mean, that was one of the things I mentioned. Yes, out of all of out of the rest. I also noticed that the intrusive use of bright outlines, especially on metallic materials. Oh, they love that. Yeah, I'm trying to take these elements into consideration when I paint, but something is still missing, especially when I don't have any metallic elements in my illustration. I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Then I remembered that the B Timo splash art didn't have that either, and the values of Timo isn't much darker than the background either, but still looks very much like League of Legends. And then the links to the images you can see below. Um, Maybe you can talk about the light setup of the scene and composition. I hope you can help me, even if my question is very broad. Um, okay, so there are rules before we begin the demo. I will paint an example of what I'm about to say. There are certain rules or guides they follow. Not necessarily like the character has to be darker than the background. I'd say the character, like a better example in my mind would be saying that a character needs to have the most contrast uh, out of everything, including the background. Um, so whether that's dark or light, for example, in Timo here, we're gonna minimize the question, make it very very small. You can't read that on stream, but that's fine. I can just zoom in if I really wanna like read it or not. Um, so if we take Timo here, as you were asking, now Timo is actually both darker and lighter. Why? Because we do that, and we see that in the highest points of contrast, he's brighter than the background, and uh, in the shadows and ambient occlusions, so like these areas here, he's also the darkest. So he's neither just one or the other. Um, although there are other examples where clearly a character is darker than the background or lighter than the background, I'd say most examples tend to well, this one for example, I'd say he's mostly dark, but like the light shining on him makes it brighter than most aspects in the background, even for the second image, right? Um, so there's that as far as contrast go, and the other question was, I'm gonna demo now the answer. The other question was let me just reread here. Yeah, this is the oh yeah, the metal or the materials, right? Um, so the materials, yeah, I remember that B Timo Splash Art didn't have that either. So the metal aspect to it, and the values of Timo is much darker in the background, but it still looks very much like League of Legends. So what defines League of Legends? Um, I would say I could boil it down to three things. Number one, let's crop this little cute guy here. We'll put it right there and hide the other one. All right, it's painting time, chat. So shapes. The very first thing that reads and what defines the League of Legends like splash art or art in general is gonna be their shapes. Obviously, many would say like perspective would probably be the first thing, because it's always like, oh, like an arm is reaching out to you or whatever. That definitely is very very important to their look overall. Um, but I wouldn't still put it in first. I'd say that when you dissect, and this character, I'm glad you posted this example here because it's very easy to decode. So when you separate the big, here we go, the big shapes, right? You have big head, and then the shape of the actual character, you know, the fur, etc. It's very, while you might have all these little details, ignore that, completely ignore that. So yeah, the face pops out of the big shape, and then you have these cute little happy whiskers. You know, he's obviously like happy. Everything is like um almost what's the word I'm looking for? Deformed, but it, oh imagine that the characters are a bit like elastic, but not to the point where it's like a cartoon. Um, but just enough that you can distort a little bit. You know, like if there's a movement happening, you can bend it beyond like actual real limitations of even anatomy. But deconstructivism, I can't say that word. But anyways, the thing is that along with the shape that you got going on, there's always just, even if just a bit, um, deformity to the shapes that make it more. It enhances a character. You do it so to enhance a character's character. It's pretty much. So you have the cute little eyes here. I'm just gonna do like very rough outlines to not spend a ton of time on this because there's other points to it. And then obviously you have these big B uh, antennas, right? These are pretty big shapes. The eyes of the actual character are very very just like very happy. You know, he's just very very happy. The same goes for the mouth. The mouth is just clearly there's a clear crease to the expression. Expressions are very very important along with the gesture, obviously, but it's all, I would say it's all shape related from observation. Then you have the hair, obviously. Um, I would, when dissecting images in general, I would recommend ignoring any little like you know uh, creases and details and things like that. If a hair looks like this, actually, I'll use a better color. So if a hair looks like this, let's say, or whatever, you want to ignore that and simplify it and just go like, oh, it's that, you know. Um, I would I would actually recommend tracing over existing images because it's different seeing and it's different actually going over it. Um, so let's continue here. So the hands are very uh, like the shapes are very simple. It's just a little cone looking thing. Um, and you have the arms. Everything is specifically for this character. I know other characters are not like that. They tend to be a bit more realistic. But this is a very good example and easy to see. I would do exactly the same that I'm doing now on other characters, as complex as they may be. You know. And then I'm gonna continue here. I'll do it roughly because there's other points I want to get to on this image, and so blah blah blah. All of these super easy readable, super easy to see, very 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 readable and cute and fun. You got the little expression there, all right, and obviously the little wings on the back. Okay, so now I'm gonna take this out and just look at the shapes as they are, you know. And you can tell that even though I simplified it quite a lot and I rushed it and all that, um, I uh, I can see that everything tends to work very very nicely and readable due to its shapes and their deformity. Helping the shapes helps the character's character. Um, so I would say this is the number one thing that makes that I would put emphasis on splash art. Other than I'd say perspective is like right after because the dynamic perspective slash composition is important, but along with perspective is the idea. So the idea behind you can't just make. I wouldn't recommend making just a dynamic perspective. Let me see if I what this. So this character here has he's dynamic, but not in perspective. He's dynamic in shapes, like the effects, right? Also dynamic in the way the muscles and the anatomy is structured. Um, so where there's no uh, dynamic in perspective, it is added in the shapes, and the same is still applied to the little b guy here. Now materials. So I'd say that's the main thing that, in my opinion, defines riot art, especially the newer ones, where I personally believe it's better than usual. Um, and let's move this over here. So materials, move it over here. Let's paint. I'll call it pick here because why not? Um, so you understand from what I read, you understand how metal works based on my explanation, but you're confused on the softer end of things. So here's the thing: even though something is softer, it still has a sharp edge. So, for example, the edge, you have a hat, right? And then you have the edge of the hat. We'll do here the hat real real quick. Yeah, let's say it's that. And now there's two things happening that are gonna happen here. First of all, as you mentioned in your question, I still think that gradients are extremely important for um, like League of Legends type of, their general rendering. Obviously, every image is a little different from another, but if we're gonna put everything in one bag, I would still approach this um, in the same way that I approached metal. The very first Decodes episode was decoding Riot's metal. So I would still do that, except I would stop earlier on. So let's begin the render. I have the shape painted, right? And I am going to apply some light and shadow. So um, so in this point, you can choose whether you want to do it manually. You can go ahead and be like, I'll take, oops, I forgot to bring this here so you guys can see the colors that I'm picking and stuff. So there you go. From this point on, you can do it manually. So pick the color, right? Um, I clip the layer, so that means that when I paint, it doesn't paint over, right? Uh, and I could go and paint light and shadow like this directly, and you get the same result. However, chances are that in a production environment, you most likely use adjustment layers because it's um, very easy to change things when you're asked to, right? You're in a team environment where someone is gonna most likely art direct you. So I would make a new layer, and I love hard light layer. Now I don't know if that's what was used in this painting, But I am a sucker for hard light layer because hard light layer overwrites values. You know, have you ever used an overlay layer on a really dark image and you try to make it brighter, like significantly brighter, and it doesn't really go that bright because it's too dark? Well, hard light really hard light can do that. So you can add that overlay aspect to it, but also can really go um, make a pure black color go to pure white, right? And it is a double-edged sword because you want to be careful with it, right? So right now I'm using a hard light layer. It's a separate layer. I'll show you. You see, it's a separate layer, and I just pick the color with like some yellow, right? And I am um, in a gradient manner. I am adding light. Uh, yeah, I'll add some light. I add some shadow. Now you could make a separate layer for each individual thing. So one layer for light, one layer for shadow, one layer for bounce light. Uh, Another thing, so materials. When we talk about materials for League of Legends, we cannot, and what defines League of Legends, we cannot ignore lighting, because the reason why a material looks the way it is, other than the material itself, the texture of the material itself, is the light setup of League of Legends, which is usually, you'll notice it in like almost every image, it's tree lights. There is a exception to the rules, but it's main light source. So in this case, it's top right light hitting here. The yellow, the more yellow one from the sun. It's a fill light. Now this one is the trickiest one. Now let me show you. So fill light is, I'll make a new layer, set it to, you guys can see that, but just take my word for it. Fill light is that light in the mid-tones. Oh, actually you can kind of see it here. I'll actually outline it. This could be called ambient light. There's many ways you could explain it, but like this section right here is, it's very subtle. But a fill light is a light, natural or artificial. It happens in both. This type of light uh, also used very commonly in photography because it shows the curvature, or it shows as clear a surface area. And like many games, Riot is not like, they're not special for this, but uh, they do really try to make sure that everything is readable. You can see everything clearly, no matter how small or how big. So they try to not go too dark. They try to not go too bright. Although their older art, they were abusing fucking like highlights. They were pretty much a YouTuber beauty guru. Their highlight is just fucking, it's it's everywhere. I'm kidding. Okay, let's be serious here. Like, yeah, old Riot art was, there was something about they just snorting highlights all over the place. But anyways, it seems like they decide to use a lot more fill light because that's less intrusive, it's less harsh looking as well, and um, it shows the forms easier. And I say this area here um, is a good example of that, right? Um, what else? Oh, by the way, I'm reading you chat, and I will reply to you guys once I'm done answering once I answering this question. We'll take a break, and I'll chat with you guys for a bit. So for now, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just focusing on the answer. Um, so let's go back to what I was saying. So we have the, let me grab the color here. So I'm gonna continue and like add the light, you know. I'm using a soft brush. The cool thing about soft brushes is that if you make them very small, they can look like hard brushes by contrast. So I'm always resizing them where I feel like it could be a little sharper, an area a little sharper. I'll just make my brush smaller, and it will look sharper. And then for the fill light, now this is where it gets a little trickier. I'm gonna pick a very subtle here. Try that. Maybe a little green. Whoa, a little green. That's good. That's good. So you will notice, maybe a little brighter too. You might notice that there's actually a fill light helping the main light source, which is the sun. So I'm gonna add it. There's a little bit here on top, and I'll zoom in so you can see exactly. You see here at the top of the hat, right here. So there's a little bit of that in there. Where else can we see it? We can see it a little bit here. We can see it a little bit there, and we can see it a lot here, which is I'd say in this area, the left side of the hat is a mix of rim light or natural rim light, not actual rim light, but just a mix of like bounce light acting like a rim light, um, mixed in with ambient light, right? So we're gonna do exactly that, and this is it's extremely important to know like lighting conditions, lighting setups, and just as much as you can about lighting, especially for Riot um, imagery, because they use that the most to depict texture, right? Which is something you would do uh, in any other art style, most likely. I'm also gonna make it a bit more blue, and I'm gonna add the quote unquote rim light. It's not quite that, but it's an ambient light acting like a rim light. I'm gonna do that, and it's a blend of the two because the two light sources in there are helping each other out, right? And this is why this image may look like, to some of you may even look like one light source. Like you'd say, oh, it's the sun, but it's actually three, however you say that word. Um, so let's. This question was a bit loaded, so I'm taking my time explaining because otherwise it'll just lead to confusion. So this video might be a bit more. It might be longer than others. Um, let's add some shadow. Again, I'm still in hard light layer and separate layers as well. And let's add a little bit of the shadow, like so. Okay. And this would pretty much be your setup to then start adding the texture. Now, for anything that's soft, there's not a harsh like white outline like in the metal, like in a lot of metal. Yeah, you see here in a lot of their metal renders, there's always this like very fine white, not necessarily white, but brighter outline on the metal. So this still exists even in softer textures like this one, but it's very subtle. It's extremely subtle and soft. It's not harsh. I mean, when you think about it, it makes sense because if you're painting something soft like cotton, you don't want to have like a harsh line going in there. But you look at the wool, or at the woolen gloves, or whatever you call that, you can see that that is happening. Here, I'll grab a more contrasting color so you can see what I'm outlining. Right there, bat, bat, bat. It still happens, but it's very minimal. It's soft, and the value of it isn't that big. You will also notice it here. look at these. It is sharp. This one is actually quite sharp, but because the value of the outline is similar to the area next to it, it doesn't seem to be. It doesn't look like they would be doing that. But I'm kind of like tracing over where I see some of it. You know, here I see some of it here, like right there. If you really zoom in, you can quite tell that it is in there. There's maybe a little bit there, but you get what I'm saying, right? Um, so it exists. It's just that the value that they pick is almost like it doesn't contrast very much, making it look like it's not there, but it is. Um, so let me continue with the render here. I'll just do the yellow hat. I won't do the hair and anything else because again, this is a long-winded answer, and there's no other way to answer it properly without like, making it more confusing. So I'm just gonna. Oh yeah, the same happens in the shadows. So I know I was talking about the light areas, but the same happens in the shadows, by the way. And it's a good thing to point out. So I'm gonna do exactly. I'm gonna do a little bit of that here in the very darkest areas, and I'm gonna pause here. Now this would be my setup, right? Light and shadow, and then ambient light slash well, slash quote unquote rim light. Not really, but you have your light setup here. Now the texture will come from this point. Um, there's several ways you can achieve this. By the way, this is not the only thing. Uh, you can go in manually, which is what I most likely would do. I would go in. I'll zoom in for this one so you can see what I mean. I would go in and I would color pick whatever area, like whatever dark area there is here. And I would draw the texture. Right, so I would just black, you know, and I would color pick the brighter area, and I would go reverse, and I would be very subtle with this, and then back again, you know, and then on again, and then back again. You know what I mean? And I keep doing it over and over and over again. However, let me go back. What Riot likes to do a lot as well is use actual textures. Before we do though, I want to make a I'm gonna make a little. You know what? I'll do it manually because it's just gonna be faster. I'm gonna make a little outline. Um, I'm just showing you a few ways you can like achieve the same thing. But the way most artists in there tend to do is use actual textures, and then they paint over it. That's not going to be the end of it. I'll slap a texture and it's over. Chances are they build the texture. There's some images. Again, this is why it's a little hard to um, like you can't put everyone in the same basket because some like to build texture manually first, then add photo texture, then paint over. Some like to add in the beginning of the like very early on and then build it up from there. So it's a very personal thing. All they really care is that there's the same look towards the end. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of the seam here beforehand. You can do it before, you can do it after. I just choose to do it before because I like it. That's pretty much the idea of it. There's no hard rule for when do you do something for this kind of like jobs and stuff. All they really care about is that does it look, is the end result looking like it would fit the rest, you know, the other illustrations they have. So I'm just gonna do that real quick. I'm gonna adjust some of the values here that I feel like are Maybe a bit, done a bit better, right? There you go. And now I'm gonna very quickly just type in wool texture in Google. I'm gonna grab like the first thing that I see. Not spend too much time here. These will do. Fine, whatever. There you go. Bam. Let me make it smaller. It seems like it's quite small. So we're gonna do that. I'm gonna duplicate. Hopefully this texture actually repeats. If not, it's not a big deal either. You'll get the point regardless. Oh, it seems like it's gonna be fine. Guess I was lucky getting a repeatable texture. So I'm just gonna quickly duplicate here. And they do this. I'm doing wool here, right? But they do this in a lot of, if not, I'd say most textures. They do slap a photo texture and then they will paint over. They never just let it be in there. All right, so I'm just going to very roughly. Again, this is something that takes time, and I don't want to. There's more questions I need to answer, so I'm going to make this very roughly, but we'll see that the result will be quite similar. The only difference is that I would have to spend more time doing it. So I'm gonna warp. I'm using warp tool for this. I'm gonna put it here. I'm gonna clip it and set it to overlay. Oh, look at that! Oh, doesn't that look similar? Huh, interesting. Now you can see that the texture shows in more in some areas than others. I will explain that now. I'm just gonna soften up here, and I'm gonna do exactly the same. So here's the thing: when you add a photo texture, it sticks out like a sore thumb if you don't take care of it. Once you add one photo texture and you don't add it to anything else, it's going to stand out. That's why you gotta sort of you add and then you remove, right? So I'm just going around. All I'm really doing right now, I'm going around. I'm sort of like I'm thinking like actually in reality, if light is like directly hitting a texture, it tends to flatten out that area. And in areas where in the midtones, that's where texture shows the most. So at angles, if the sun comes and the texture is at an angle, you'll see most of the texture on that angle instead of being like when the sun is directly shining on top of it. So in these brightest areas, it's going to be a little softer, but as it's turning away, we see more of the texture because that's just how it is. Hi Caitlin, how are you doing? And then the same is going to be on the other light sources. Right? I'm keeping that into consideration, and obviously I still did a very sloppy sloppy job on the texture. Obviously you want to spend time warping it nicely so that it goes around the form properly, right? But I'm going to show most of the texture where also actually Asben he's a friend, so I mean I could just go and ask him. But I'm pretty sure this is what he has done. So I'm erasing some of it, and now we're not done. The last step for the question is you actually need to go in, and you can grab any brush. Let me guess what brush he used here. Definitely use something textured. Oh, he made. Okay, so there's a few more things he has done at the end. I'll explain. So he went with I'm gonna go with a triangle brush. Honestly, you can go with anything that's kind of like sharp. He added some like some folds and things like that. So he's here's another thing. Texture tends to flatten an image. So all that really means is that you always have to go back and repaint areas, because um, I know I know to the untrained eye it might look like, oh, it's finished. It looks clean and it looks like rendered out. But actually this looks cheap. But what I have in front of me right now, it just looks cheap. Um, and you always want to go in and add some variety to it. Add some I'm actually gonna maybe grab a soft chalky kind of textury brush to break down the smoothness, because texture tends to smooth things out. Even when it's like a rock texture, you'd think that it roughs things out, but not really. Just the I guess it's more of a layer issue. Like the overlay layer tends to soften things up, and that's usually the best layer to well overlay texture. Right, so you want to go around and like actually paint in each um, like a row manually, and like follow the texture that you placed in. Okay, so I'm also gonna throw down some um, like I'm gonna make it just a little like dirty, not like it's not really dirty, but like some extra texture there, showing some variety here and there. Right, to break down the smoothness. And you see that everywhere. You see it on the hair. You see it on the little and fluffy antennas. You just see it in everything. Not just the this little part that I'm doing of the drawing. So what I'm doing right now, it is applied to every element, every texture, soft, hard, uh, shiny or matte. It doesn't matter. Make it dirty. Yeah. So I'm not gonna do much more of this because I spent quite a bit of time answering this question. It was a loaded question though, I will say. Usually the Silva Decodes videos, the answers are like around 20 minutes or so, but this one was a bit like what defines right? Like there's not just one thing that defines it. It's like a combination of several ones. But I appreciate the question because I get to kind of like warm up, right? So I may have gone a little too hard on the textures here and there. There's one last step. I mean, obviously he spent more time. There's more elements to it, right? So I'm not gonna do that because I have more questions to answer. But one last thing he does is he got the sharpen tool. So I clicked on sharpen tool in Popo Shop, Poppy Shop, and I bet anything he probably used luminosity mode. If not, even normal mode is fine. But on the top right, top left, I'll show you guys. Blah, bleep. On the top left, where the modes of like brushes or the tools that you have selected are, there's a few options to choose. Usually it's set to normal for the sharpen tool. I would always recommend to set this to luminosity. I can't remember when's the last time I set it to normal. And I would highly recommend it because merge everything. I can go over the detail. Okay, so I'm gonna overdo it so you can see what I'm doing here. This is what's happening. Now, can you see a similar effect to this somewhere? For example, here. For example, there. Here. There's like little bits and pieces where I can tell that he used that. Now, if we do it gently, let's bring out some of that. Oh, look at that. Does that look similar? Nice. I actually do think that he may have used normal because I see that, yeah, he may have actually used normal. I would not recommend this, right? Um, this is my critique to the image. I would not recommend that because um, it burns the details. Does that make sense? Instead of enhancing them, it burns them. I don't think many people know about the luminosity, even though I preach it all the time, and no one ever told me about it. It's something that I figured out by playing around. So I would actually set my sharpen tool to luminosity and go ahead and pull out the details that I want to, depending on what's my focus. Right, so I could add a little bit here. Don't go overboard, you know. Just I'm doing like small touches, like small taps, you know. So tap tap tap, you know. And obviously this is unfinished. So the more finished your image is, the more you can use it. I love using it on seams, on edges that are very thin, and I want them to pop out more. Like it really helps bringing it out and sharpening it. But there you go. Not too bad, huh, chat? I mean, for the short time put into it, I'd say this question is answered. Um, so we're gonna move on to the next question. We're gonna move on to the next question. Thank you for if you're watching this on video, then thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Ah! Ah!